I noticed an interesting difference between American English and British English today while reading an article.
I also came across a unique variation while listening to a British podcast earlier.
I found it fascinating how Americans say apartment while British speakers prefer flat.
I enjoy noticing such differences because they make the language feel colorful.
I heard someone mention elevator in an American show, and in a British series, the same thing was called a lift.
I like how these variations reflect different cultural histories.
I noticed that Americans say truck, while British speakers use the word lorry.
I think these vocabulary changes make conversations more interesting.
I learned that Americans say cookie, but British speakers usually say biscuit.
I often imagine different things when I hear these words.
I heard an American person talk about chips, while British chips refer to something different.
I always find food vocabulary comparisons entertaining.
I realized that Americans call the season fall, while British speakers say autumn.
I feel that both words create their own atmosphere.
I noticed that Americans say sweater, whereas British speakers prefer jumper.
I enjoy learning clothing related differences because they are fun to use.
I heard someone mention vacation in an American interview, and British speakers would call it holiday.
I think both words bring a sense of excitement.
I noticed that Americans say cell phone, while British speakers usually say mobile phone.
I switch between the two depending on the type of English I am focusing on.
I realized that Americans say faucet, and British speakers use the word tap.
I like how these small differences appear in daily life situations.
I learned that Americans say line when waiting, but British speakers use queue.
I find the British version quite elegant.
I noticed the American spelling color and the British spelling color.
I find these spelling differences fun to explore.
I saw the American Spelling Center and compared it with the British Spelling Center.
I like how small letters change the entire feel of the word.
I heard the American word garbage while British speakers say rubbish.
I think these words show how English evolves in different regions.
I noticed that Americans say flashlight, while British speakers say torch.
I always find the British version charming.
I learned that Americans say sneakers, and British speakers use the word trainers.
I like how both versions feel natural in their own settings.
I heard someone refer to the trunk of a car in American English, while British speakers call it the boot.
I enjoy these vehicle-related differences because they sound vivid.
I noticed Americans say hood for the front part of a car, and British speakers call it the bonnet.
I think the British version sounds quite classy.
I realized that Americans say gasoline, while British speakers use petrol.
I like how these terms highlight different lifestyles.
I heard an American person say apartment building, while British speakers would call it a block of flats.
I find it interesting how phrases grow differently in each style.
I noticed Americans say diaper, while British speakers use the word nappy.
I think these differences are especially common in family conversations.
I heard the American word stroller, while British speakers say pushchair.
I enjoy how these childcare terms vary so much.
I realized that Americans say cookie store, while British speakers say biscuit shop.
I imagine both places smelling delightful.
I noticed Americans use the word mailbox, while British speakers often say postbox.
I find the British version quite traditional.
I heard someone say candy in American English, while British speakers say sweets.
I think both words sound delightful.
I learned that Americans say movie, while British speakers say film.
I feel each version sets a different tone.
I noticed Americans say restroom, while British speakers say toilet.
I like how direct the British version sounds.
I came across the American term fries, while British speakers say chips for the same thing.
I always need to clarify this in my mind.
I heard someone use the American word schedule with a different pronunciation than in British English.
I enjoy how pronunciation changes add flavor to speech.
I noticed that Americans say aluminum, while British speakers pronounce it aluminium.
I find the extra syllable surprisingly satisfying.
I heard someone say math in American English, while British speakers say maths.
I think the British version feels more complete.
I noticed that Americans say real estate, while British speakers say property.
I find these business terms fascinating.
I learned that Americans say downtown, while British speakers use the term city center.
I imagine different city images when I hear these words.
I heard someone use the American word faucet again, and a British speaker replied with tap.
I like how both versions sound familiar now.
I noticed that Americans say candy bar, while British speakers say chocolate bar.
I enjoy learning food expressions like these.
I heard the American greeting, "How are you doing?" spoken differently in British English.
I like how each region brings its own rhythm to greetings.
I noticed that Americans say parking lot, while British speakers say car park.
I find the British version very straightforward.
I learned that Americans say sidewalk, while British speakers use the word pavement.
I imagine different streets depending on which word I hear.
I heard someone say yard in American English, while British speakers often say garden.
I think this difference creates a completely different picture.
I noticed Americans say cookie dough, while British speakers might say biscuit mixture.
I enjoy how culinary vocabulary changes from place to place.
I heard the American word faucet repeated again, and British speakers stay consistent with tap.
I feel comfortable using either now.
I realized that Americans say closet, while British speakers use wardrobe.
I like how the British word sounds more elegant.
I noticed Americans say trash can, while British speakers say bin.
I find the shorter British version easier to use.
I heard someone mention freeway in American English, while British speakers say motorway.
I imagine different kinds of roads when I hear each term.
I learned that Americans say pacifier, while British speakers say dummy.
I find these childcare terms amusing.
I noticed Americans say bangs for hair, while British speakers use the word fringe.
I like how both terms give a different impression.
I heard someone say zucchini in American English, while British speakers call it courgette.
I think these vegetable names are especially interesting.
I realized Americans say eggplant and British speakers say aubergine.
I find these vocabulary changes delightful.
I noticed that Americans say realtor, while British speakers say estate agent.
I enjoy comparing professional terms like these.
I heard someone say windshield in American English, while British speakers say windscreen.
I imagine different types of cars with each word.